Hey everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a story that I think you'll find both fascinating and kind of disturbing. I mean, it's really a story about resilience and activism, but also just like a huge environmental mess up.
Yeah, a total disaster.
So we're talking about Love Canal,
Love Canal.
and we're going to be looking at an interview with Kiko Bryan, who wrote Paradise Falls, which is all about this whole environmental disaster.
And you know what's really interesting about Love Canal is how this whole thing kind of sparked a movement.
Yeah.
You had everyday people, and especially women,
Right.
who became like accidental activists fighting for their families and kind of pushing for change on a national level.
So let's rewind a little bit. Let's paint a picture of what this place was actually like. O'Brien describes this neighborhood in Niagara Falls called LaSalle.
Okay.
And like back in the 50s and 60s, this place was booming,
Right.
affordable homes, family friendly, they called it the picture of suburban bliss.
Yeah, a real slice of the American dream.
Ex
But to like fully grasp the contrast, I think we need to go back even further.
Right.
Because Niagara Falls wasn't just, about the natural beauty of the falls themselves.
Right.
It was actually a major industrial center.
Hmm.
And a lot of that industry was driven by chemical companies.
So that's what brought a lot of people there in the first place.
Exactly. Jobs in the chemical plants drew families to the area.
Okay.
But this economic boom had like this hidden dark side.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. So that's where William T. Love enters the story.
Okay.
This guy was a big dreamer, maybe even like a little bit of a schemer. He had this vision of building a canal that would bypass the falls
Interesting.
for shipping, like a shortcut to even more prosperity for the region.
Wow.
But the project totally failed, and what was left was just this giant ditch.
So what happened to the ditch?
Well, it became really convenient, as a dumping ground for all sorts of industrial waste, especially for this company, Hooker Chemical. They used it for years. I mean, especially after World War II, when chemical production just exploded.
Oh.
And then, get this, they sold the land to the city for $1.
Wait, $1. Seriously.
$1.
That's crazy. I mean, like, you can't even buy a cup of coffee for $1 these days.
Right.
It's just mind-blowing how little they seem to care about what they were leaving behind.
It really shows how differently people thought about industrial waste back then.
Yeah.
So fast forward,
Okay.
the city builds a school
Uh-huh.
right on top of this former chemical dump.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and naturally homes started popping up all around it.
Wow.
People moved in,
Yeah.
kids played, families grew, life just went on as normal.
But underneath it all, there were these warning signs.
Yeah, almost like whispers of the nightmare that was brewing beneath the surface.
So what kind of warning signs are we talking about?
Well, O'Brien mentioned some seriously creepy stuff.
Okay.
Like fires erupting out of nowhere.
Rats.
Yeah, and kids finding these rocks that would burst into flames.
No way.
Yeah, it's true.
Imagine that happening in your backyard.
Yeah, those weren't actually rocks, though.
Right.
They were clumps of chemical residue reacting to friction or moisture.
Oh, wow.
The really scary part is that these signs were there,
Yeah.
but people just dismissed them.
Wow. It makes you wonder how often we miss those subtle signs of trouble, right?
Right.
But at Love Canal, those whispers, they would soon turn into screams
That's for sure.
that no one could ignore.
And that's where we meet Luella Kenny,
Okay.
a mother living in LaSalle, right in the heart of this developing nightmare.
So tell me about her.
Well, in 1978, her youngest son, John Allen,
Okay.
he started having all these really scary health problems.
Like what?
Seizures, severe infections, even organ damage.
Oh, my gosh.
And the doctors, they were completely baffled.
Wow.
It's important to remember the context here. Like back in the 1970s,
Okay.
chemicals were everywhere,
Right.
and the dangers, they just weren't widely understood or even acknowledged. Plus, like O'Brien points out, women's voices, especially in science, were often just ignored.
Right.
But Luella was different.
Okay.
She was a scientist herself.
Oh, wow.
And, talk about a mother's intuition.
Yeah.
She wasn't just fighting for her son. She was actually using her research skills to try and figure out what was wrong with him.
So sad.
Yeah, unfortunately, John Allen passed away that same year.
Oh, gosh.
But Luella, she refused to give up.
Wow.
She was determined to find answers. She started researching, poring over medical journals,
Yeah.
meticulously comparing John Allen's symptoms to those experienced by people who worked with chemicals.
Wow.
Remember, this is pre-internet, so you can imagine the effort involved.
Oh,
And gradually, she started connecting the dots.
Wow.
Could her son's illness, she wondered, be a result of living on top of this toxic waste dump?
That's an incredible thought.
Yeah, and around the same time, another resident, Lois Gibbs, was starting her own fight.
Okay, tell me about Lois.
Well, Lois just wanted her son, who was having seizures, moved out of the 99th Street School.
Understandable.
Right. It seemed like a totally reasonable request.
Yeah.
But the school board denied it.
Seriously?
Yeah, they insisted the school was safe.
Wow.
It's just this blatant disregard for a mother's worry. You know?
Yeah.
This dismissal of potential danger. It's like a recurring theme in the Love Canal story.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so Lois could have just accepted that and moved on, but something inside her just snapped.
She just had enough.
Exactly. She transformed from, a self-described housewife into this fearless activist.
Wow.
Petitions, door knocking, confronting officials publicly. She did it all.
That's amazing.
And this is where we see the incredible power of collective action. Lois wasn't alone.
Right.
More and more residents were reporting strange illnesses, miscarriages, birth defects.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, the evidence was mounting and people were demanding answers.
Yeah, and there's also Beverly Pagan, who O'Brien mentioned.
Oh, yeah, Beverly.
She was a scientist working for a state lab.
Right.
And she actually risked her career to help the residents.
That's right.
They started doing their own health surveys, collecting data that the authorities had basically ignored.
It's incredible how these residents, mostly women, they presented their findings, but they were met with just skepticism and condescension.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, their research was labeled housewife data.
Ugh, that's so patronizing.
It really highlights the power dynamics at play.
Absolutely. It's just infuriating.
Right.
They had evidence they were desperate to protect their families,
Yeah.
but they were dismissed because they weren't, experts. But they didn't back down.
Nope.
Protests, media attention, they kept pushing their message out there.
Absolutely. And then came the chromosome study.
Oh.
It was a small study,
Yeah.
but the results were alarming.
Oh, no.
A higher than normal rate of chromosomal abnormalities in Love Canal residents.
Wow.
This was a turning point. Even though the study's methods were later questioned, the scientific evidence was becoming harder to ignore.
Right.
And then things escalated dramatically.
Well.
Lois and some other mothers, they basically held 2 EPA officials hostage.
Wow. I mean, I'm not condoning that approach, but
Yeah,
you can understand their desperation, right?
absolutely. It was a desperate plea for attention.
Right.
A last-ditch effort to be heard.
And it worked.
It did. The story exploded in the media, putting Love Canal on the national stage.
So finally, after years of fighting, these residents were gaining recognition.
Yeah, but the battle was far from over.
Right.
Stay with us as we continue to unpack the Love Canal story and its lasting impact.
It's going to be good.
Right.
It's easy to think that once the government stepped in, it was all, problem solved. Like toxic waste to sick families, the government swoops in and saves the day.
Yeah, if only it were that simple.
Exactly. But as we're going to see, it was so much more complicated than that.
It took a really long time for any meaningful action to happen. Yeah, I mean, these residents had been fighting for years, facing all these bureaucratic obstacles, legal battles,
Wow.
and just constant pushback from these corporations.
It's crazy how often those in power just prioritize profit over people.
Yeah, it's a disturbing pattern.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, what if those women hadn't been so persistent?
Right.
What if they just accepted what the authorities were telling them?
I mean, the impact of Love Canal is undeniable.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about cleaning up one neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was a turning point for the entire environmental movement.
That's so true. Love Canal became this symbol of how we were treating the environment.
Exactly.
And it forced people to confront this uncomfortable reality, that progress often comes with hidden costs.
And those costs are often borne by communities like Love Canal.
Right.
Marginalized, ignored, lacking the resources to fight back.
But Love Canal proved that even ordinary people, when they unite and they're determined,
Yeah.
they can make a difference.
They can change the world.
It's so inspiring. They took on these powerful corporations,
Yeah.
challenged government agencies, and they forced them to take responsibility.
And one of the most significant outcomes of that whole fight was the creation of the Superfund program.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So the Superfund program was a direct response to Love Canal.
Okay.
It was designed to provide funding to clean up toxic waste sites all over the country.
Wow. So thanks to the bravery of those women in Love Canal,
Yeah.
there's now a system in place to address these kinds of environmental disasters.
Yeah.
And it's been used to clean up thousands of sites,
Thousands.
protecting so many communities from sharing the same fate.
It's amazing what they accomplished.
It really is. So the Superfund program, basically identifies these polluted areas,
Uh-huh.
ranks them based on risk,
Right.
and then uses government funding to clean them up.
Exactly. It's not perfect, but it's a huge step forward.
Yeah, but like you said before, the fight isn't over.
Oh, no, not at all.
We're still facing so many environmental challenges.
Oh, climate change, pollution, environmental justice. I mean, the list goes on.
Right. The lessons of Love Canal are more relevant than ever.
Absolutely. We can't afford to be complacent.
Right.
We have to hold our leaders accountable, demand transparency, and be willing to speak up for what's right.
Just like the residents of Love Canal did.
Exactly. And what's really remarkable is that many of those women are still fighting today.
Really?
Yeah. O'Brien mentions how Lois Gibbs, for example, founded the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice.
Wow.
She's continued to advocate for environmental protection all these years.
That's incredible.
It's a testament to their dedication. They didn't just win their own battle.
Right.
They dedicated their lives to making sure others wouldn't have to fight the same fight.
So inspiring.
Their courage and determination continue to inspire activists and communities around the world.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the main takeaway from Love Canal?
Love Canal isn't just a story of tragedy.
Right.
It's a story of courage, resilience, and hope. It shows that even against impossible odds, change is possible.
That's powerful.
And that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can triumph.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in protecting our environment
Yeah.
and our communities.
Absolutely. Think about the women of Love Canal.
Okay.
What environmental challenge in your community might need your voice, your action?
That's a great question.
Maybe there's a local pollution issue you're concerned about.
Yeah.
Or a development project that threatens a natural area.
Right.
Love Canal teaches us that we don't have to be scientists or politicians to make a difference.
We can all be agents of change.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah.
We hope you learned something new, felt inspired, and maybe even a little fired up to make a change.
Remember, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
It's amazing how this whole neighborhood became like a breeding ground for activism.
Right.
It's like the toxic waste wasn't the only thing bubbling up there.
You know, it's really fascinating how adversity can bring out such incredible resilience and action.
Yeah.
Like, think about Luella Kenny.
Yeah.
She was a grieving mother, of course, but she was also a scientist.
Right?
And she channeled that grief into research, meticulously connecting her son's illness to those chemicals dumped years before.
And O'Brien mentions how she even identified specific toxins
Oh, yeah.
like benzene and dioxin that matched up with his symptoms,
It's incredible.
turning personal tragedy into this quest for truth.
Absolutely. And she faced so much resistance along the way.
Oh, I bet.
People dismissed her concerns because she was a woman,
Right.
a housewife, not a real expert.
It's hard to believe that attitude was so pervasive back then.
I know it's shocking, but it was sadly all too common.
Right.
Women were often seen as, belonging in the domestic sphere.
Right.
Their knowledge and experiences were just discounted.
But Luella refused to be silenced.
Absolutely. She and Lois Gibbs and others, they showed the world that a housewife's intuition could be just as powerful as any scientific study.
And speaking of Lois Gibbs,
Yeah.
her transformation is just remarkable.
I know, right?
Going from being afraid to speak up at a PTA meeting
Uh-huh.
to leading protests and even holding EPA officials hostage. I mean, talk about finding your voice.
It's a testament to the power of a mother's love,
Right.
but also to the transformative nature of collective action.
That's a good point.
Lois didn't set out to be a leader,
Yeah.
but the situation demanded it.
Right.
And as more residents joined her, their voices amplified and their demands became impossible to ignore.
And it wasn't just about demanding answers.
Yeah.
It was about taking control.
Exactly.
Like, remember that housewife data they collected?
Oh, yeah.
They didn't just complain. They did the research themselves.
They mapped out the health problems, connected them to specific locations.
Wow.
They built a case that even skeptical officials couldn't deny.
That's a powerful lesson in citizen science.
Absolutely. They weren't content to wait for someone else to save them.
Right.
They took initiative, empowered themselves with knowledge,
Yeah.
and forced those in power to listen.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Love Canal,
Yeah.
what's the message for us today?
I think Love Canal teaches us that we can't underestimate the power of one voice, one action.
Right.
It shows us that even when facing seemingly impossible odds, a small group of dedicated individuals can spark monumental change.
It's about recognizing that we don't need to wait for permission to stand up for what's right.
Exactly. Whether it's an environmental issue, a social injustice, any cause that matters to us.
Love Canal shows that ordinary people can be extraordinary catalysts for change.
It's about having the courage to ask questions,
Yeah.
challenge the status quo,
Yeah,
demand better for ourselves and our communities.
And remember, change rarely happens overnight.
Right.
It takes persistence, resilience, a willingness to keep fighting, even when things get tough.
Just like the women of Love Canal did.
And their legacy lives on.
Absolutely.
Not just in the Superfund program and the countless lives it saved,
Yeah.
but in the inspiration they continue to provide to activists and communities around the world.
That's right.
So the next time you see an injustice, big or small, remember Love Canal.
Remember that change is possible and that your voice, your action can make a difference.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Love Canal.
We hope you've been as inspired as we have by the courage, resilience, and enduring legacy of this incredible story.